Okay, hello, and in this little review clip, we're going to look at X-linked inheritance, and then we're going to consider some genetic disorders that are found on X chromosomes, such as color blindness and male pattern baldness and hemophilia. So we will be looking at things like that. But the first thing that we need to talk about is sex, and how do we determine sex? And we determine that by our chromosomes number 23. And in females, chromosome pair number 23 will be two X chromosomes. And in males, chromosome number 23 the pair will be an X and a Y chromosome. And that's how we tell the difference between males and females. Females can only pass on this X chromosome, and males determine the sex because they can pass on either the X or the Y chromosome. So if the male passes on the X chromosome, then this X chromosome could be paired with the male X, or it could be part of the X for a male forming if this Y were to form or fuse together with it. If this X were to match up with the other X in the female, then both of these would be females. And if this X then were to match up with this Y, so if the sperm and the egg were to fertilize, then we would get a male. So when we look at this, there's a 50% chance of having a female, and there's a 50% chance of having a male. Now, just like we discussed, and I have to pause this for a minute and I'll be right back. Just like we discussed with the I chromosome for blood typing, the X chromosome actually has genes that are linked to it, which means there are genes that are only found on the X chromosome. They're not found on anything else. So we can link genes, and I'm just going to do an A now because it's easier. I can't do B's really well. But we can link that A chromosome, and if that A stands for color blindness or male pattern baldness or hemophilia, we can see that it is found on that X chromosome. So just like we did with blood typing, a female that would be considered homozygous, and we're going to call this homozygous dominant, which is different from what we called it in blood type. A female could be homozygous dominant for a disorder. They could be heterozygous for the disorder, meaning that they carry a dominant allele and they carry a recessive allele. Or they could be homozygous recessive, where they carry both recessive alleles. My apologies, this is really difficult to write with. So that's a female. So a female has a 1 out of 3 chance of being homozygous dominant, heterozygous, or homozygous recessive. Males, on the other hand, males only have that one X chromosome, as we've seen here, so they can only have one dominant allele, and then they have that Y chromosome, or they could have a recessive allele and that Y chromosome. So in men, they have a 50% chance of expressing whatever the trait is. And that's why with X-linked inheritance, it seems like the condition or the disorder happens more in males than it does in females. So let's talk about some of those genetic disorders. We started this in class for some of the classes. So the first one is color blindness, and color blindness is a recessive X-linked disorder, and it inhibits the individual person from distinguishing between certain colors like red and green. To some people they look like brown and blue and gray, where everything looks like they're in shades of blue, gray, black, and white. And these people still have the rods and cones in their eyes that would be active in determining color, but their rods and cones just don't work. So it's a recessive X-linked disorder for this. So I'm going to say uh, color blindness. I'm going to use the letter N for color blindness in this case. So if I were to have an individual, with normal vision is going to be represented by that capital N. If I were to have an individual with color blindness, they would need to have two recessive N's. And I've got to keep in mind that these are going to be X-linked. So that means that I can have an X with my dominant N linked to it, or my X with my recessive N linked to it. So in the example that I have for color blindness, let me pause here for a minute and switch screens. So in the example that I have here, I use my family. My dad was colorblind. We had so much fun with him. He was red and green colorblind, and he would come down the steps dressed for Mass on Sunday, and he would have on his red shirt, bright red shirt with his bright green pants, and he would think he was styling, and because he thought they were brown. He thought they were shades of brown and they matched, and we had to turn him back around and send him back upstairs and help him pick out his clothes for him. So my mom, it just got easier for her to lay out his clothes so he knew what matched. But my mom did not have color blindness, and her father didn't have color blindness, so she was homozygous dominant. So their genotypes, and I know that this should be a superscript, but for some reason it didn't transfer over that way. So let me write it down. So my dad's genotype would be X with that recessive N, and we knew he was a male because he had that Y chromosome. And then my mom's genotype would be the X with the capital N linked to it. Okay, and that's how she looked. So when we look at this and we do a cross, and those letters are going to disappear in just a minute because